First, I want to address something that happened in the AP women's poll this week. So history was made from a Texas perspective. Texas, the state, not UT, although certainly you could include them in this. And it's not the kind of history you want to make. So for the first time in the history of the AP Top 25 women's poll, no Texas teams were ranked. I wrote a column about it earlier this week. What do you guys make of this? I mean, is this just kind of a temporary hiccup, or is this a trend? I mean, has the level of play in the Lone Star State slipped that much? Danny, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can kind of look at it a couple ways. I mean, first, I think a lot of people deserve some applause for keeping Texas the state ranked for as long as it is. Whether or not you want to go back to Jody and what she did in the '80s at Texas, obviously Marcia Sharp at Texas Tech, and then obviously we don't need to talk about Kim. I mean, what she did these 20 years at Baylor, however long she was there, was incredible. And she kind of was keeping that streak alive these last 2 decades. Texas has definitely had some good teams, but they have not been consistent that entire time, and Baylor definitely has. So when you have that, it just takes a couple bad years or a bad season or a couple bad weeks by some of these top tier teams, because TCU is not carrying its weight. Texas Tech currently is not carrying its weight. Those lower tier teams, the Rices, the Houstons, Texas States, even if they're having really good seasons. I mean, I know Rice has had a couple good seasons, but they've really struggled to even be getting votes because they're mid-major, and unless you're a voter in the state, you really don't know about them. So it's really tough for some of those mid-majors to get that traction. So you need Baylor, you need Texas to be doing all the heavy lifting. And Baylor had that stretch where they had those those two straight losses, and that really hurt them in the poll because they were kind of near the bottom. Texas losing to Texas Tech did not help their case. So if you have the big dogs not doing all the heavy lifting, that streak is going to come to an end. But it just does kind of say is how dominant a Baylor has been these last 2 decades, what Texas has done during that stretch, and that should be applauded. But those teams are going to have to go back and do the heavy lifting if Texas wants to start another streak as a state.
Yeah, no doubt. John, what do you say?
I think it's just kind of a blip, really. Just kind of a, Texas, Baylor, they've lost a few games lately, and they're not that far out of the poll. So, I think they'll at least one or two of those teams will be back pretty soon. I would guess Texas will probably be back this next
week. Right. So Longhorns get, as we record this podcast on a Thursday, Longhorns are coming off a big win really last night against a ranked OU team. And that's 2 in a row. Who do they have next, Danny?
They have Oklahoma State on Saturday, so a rematch of one of their 2 conference losses. And I will say, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, Texas should be ranked. Like, I think it's absurd that Texas is not ranked. And I think that highlights one of the problems I do have with the AP poll is, a lot of it's a national poll, and that's the problem we have with some of these national polls. Is a lot of these national polls aren't, and this goes for me voting for a team like Maryland or, a team like UCLA or something like that. You don't see the team. You just kind of see the losses. You don't see the context. You don't see the, standings. You just kind of see the wins and losses. And you just see Texas lost to Texas Tech. You got to boot them, and you don't take any context into that. You just see Baylor lost to a Oklahoma State team. You don't see that Oklahoma State just got hot for a little bit, and also you're just punishing them for losing to Oklahoma State. Like, there's a lot of context lost in these national polls, and I'm sorry, Texas is probably the best team in the Big 12, and I think it's silly that they're not ranked because they lost to Texas Tech in Lubbock in what was Texas Tech's Super Bowl. Not that that's not a bad loss, not that Texas Tech shouldn't be, celebrating that, and Texas shouldn't be kicking themselves for that loss, but I don't think that loss should kick Texas from the poll, especially when this was the number 3 team in the preseason poll. They were voted into that spot because of Rory Harmon. They got off to a slow start because Rory wasn't playing, but now she's playing. This is the Texas team people expected. And all of a sudden, a team with a top 15 net ranking all of a sudden isn't ranked because they lost to Texas Tech. I mean, come on. That just doesn't make sense to me. And you probably make the same arguments for a Baylor, maybe deserving a spot towards the end of the poll, in the 20 range and stuff like that. But unfortunately, a lot of these polls and awards and stuff like that, when they're voted on nationally, they're regionally biased. And maybe I'd probably give the benefit of the doubt a little bit more to Big 12 teams than if I was an ACC writer or something like that. But that's just kind of how these things go. And that's just Texas should be ranked. That's just my long.
Yeah,
ramble.
no, I get that. And honestly, one of the things I did say in my column, a little bit to John's point about it being a blip, was that I do think like the Longhorns will be back there pretty soon. I mean, if they beat Oklahoma State, you're talking about three game winning streak, and they were 25 just a week ago. That feels like they would climb back in. And if Baylor can get hot again, certainly they can get back in the poll. But I will say, speaking as a voter, I do get it when teams lose and you drop them. I mean, that's what you got to do. And I also understand what, Danny, you're saying about the context of it all. I mean, losses are inevitable. And I think one of the points I made in my column was just the women's game right now has more parity than it's had maybe ever. I think it more closely mirrors the men's game than perhaps any time in history. And there used to be sort of the blue bloods at the top with UConn and Tennessee and those programs, Stanford maybe, and now it's just the talent is much more evenly distributed. And you still have some blue bloods, but they can lose too.